Hello, everyone, and welcome to Land of Eem Creator Spotlight. We are here because we've got a Kickstarter going right now. It is for Dungeoneer Adventures, beginner's game RPG, and the new expansion for Land of Eem called the Underlands. So please check that out. And today we're going to talk to Matt Jent and Alex Dodge, who are doing a couple adventures, some stretch goals for the Underlands. And we're super excited to talk to them.
Ben Costa, you go way back with Matthew and Alex, no?
Yeah. I've known Matt for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
We're excited about it over there.
I first saw Ben. Yeah, that's my daughter. She loves hearing about her dad's old days. I first saw Ben wearing a Usagi Yojimbo shirt in like our grad school, like opening of the semester mixer. And I saw his yellow shirt from across the way, and I thought, that's my guy.
That's the signal. You just wear a Usagi Yojimbo shirt in any crowded space, and you can find your guys.
Yeah.
I remember Matt, he had his bicycle seat over his shoulder, and he was just walking around with this confidence.
Like a security measure? Like you took it so no one could steal the bike, or an improvised weapon?
I didn't want people to steal my bike, and it worked until I let my guard down and said, you know what? No one's going to steal my bike. I don't need to take this seat off. And I came out to my bike one day. This was not when we were in school, but this was later. I came out to my bike, no wheels, no seat. They had taken everything they could take.
I'll be darned. Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, yeah, we've known each other a long time. And then Matt, you met Alex in Baltimore, I believe.
Yeah.
A long time ago. 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I met Ben probably 6 years ago, I would say, something like that, 7 years ago.
I was
More than
playing. I was playing
It's been like
Roleplaying
12
games.
years.
It's been that long? Wow.
I think I started playing with
terrifying.
you guys in 2013.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
We were ahead of the curve on playing online. It was like, way before like the pandemic and everybody started playing online.
Yeah.
But I was playing in real life with Alex. Alex was our GM in his tiny little kitchen. And then a bunch of us moved away from Baltimore, and we said, we have the technology. We live in the future. Let's all keep playing together. And then that opened up it opened up new pathways in my brain. And I thought I could invite everyone cool I've ever met into this group. And so I got Ben to come play, I think a Star Wars RPG is what we started together.
Yeah, that's what we started with.
That was fun. That leads into my question about like where did your like RPG gaming journeys begin as kids? Like how did that happen?
Yeah.
I kind of know Matt's beginning because it's very similar to mine. AD&D, right? Second edition.
Yeah, my brother, I have an older brother, and so he would just have books laying around. And he was my older brother, so he would never play with me. But I would steal his books and read through them, and I was just really into dragons and people with swords and weird little goblins and stuff. And so I eventually started when I was in high school, found some other nerds to play AD&D second edition with me. And we had like all those handbooks with like the brown faux leather covers and all that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm still super into that art style of like warriors with feathered earrings, and there's lightning everywhere and lots of sort of kind of poppy colors. I like that sort of thing.
Nice.
What about you,
I did
Alex?
not start as a child. I played D&D one time in middle school, and it was a hilarious but terrible experience. My friend Adam, who now is like the coolest guy I know and is like a professional rock star and has a sweet pointy beard and long hair. Back then he was a giant dork just like me, and he came home with a D&D module to play, and me and some friends started playing it with him, and we just tortured him. He was trying to run the module as it was written, and we just kept being like, well, I do this, and he'd be like, well, you can't do, and we'd be like, oh, it already happened.
You already did it.
The no take backsies. And he got so mad, and he made us stop playing. And then we were all like, well, D&D doesn't work. I don't know how anybody plays that
I was
game.
sold a bill of goods, and this isn't true at all. I can't do anything I want to do.
And I was writing my dissertation, and I was like lonely. I was like at home all day with a baby, writing all day alone. And there was a comic book store at the end of my street. And so I would just go to the comic book store like 3 times a day, walking the baby down there. And I got to know the comic book store guy. And one time he was like, hey, you want to play D&D in the store after hours? And I was like, of course I do. Not because I wanted to play D&D, but just because I was terribly lonely. And it was great. And I met some folks that I still to this day play D&D with. We got very lucky with some folks, James and Dave and Donnie, that I met that first night that I'm still friends with to this day. Credit. Matt was not there. I met Matt through Donnie, through one of the guys that was there that first night, just like a year later.
Our first meeting together was
we played Fiasco. It was so fun.
It was my first time playing Fiasco, and I had sort of stuck with like old school D&D like over the years, off and on. Fiasco was my first like, oh, it doesn't have to be that way. You can play other kinds of games. You can play stories. You can play characters. You don't have to win the game, or like winning the game isn't killing the dragon. It's the friends you made along the way. And yeah, that's how we started playing together.
But I've been playing with those folks that I met that night for almost 15 years now, and they are super close friends. And Matt and Ben, you guys sort of joined in with those folks, and it's pretty incredible. I got very lucky meeting the people that I met in that way, and I was not lonely anymore, which is one of the joys of role-playing games.
No kidding.
It's community experience.
If you got miss it a lot, can't play with you because of scheduling issues now. But having a kid, different coasts. But like, I really, not only were our AD&D long-running AD&D campaign, it's amazing. But we also played a bunch of. You guys play so many games, and I don't really get to experience that anymore. Like just a breadth of games.
You've created a game that is so good and popular, you cannot experience the joy of other games anymore. Your own success.
Now that's hilarious.
That's one of the games that we played as a group. We played Land of Eem when it was first play testing, when John and James were writing it.
I remember getting reports on like how the game went.
Yeah, these guys are early play testers.
Yeah.
So it was a no-brainer to have you guys come and write adventures. I mean, I went to grad school for writing with Matt. I know he's an awesome writer, and I know Alex is a great writer. I know you've made your own games. Explain that, Alex.
Oh, Lead and Gold is a card-based tabletop role-playing game. It's almost like a tabletop LARP. It's not very dice-driven. There's no dice. It runs off of the deck of cards, and it takes place in the aftermath of a failed bank robbery. And it's a bunch of bank robbers sitting around their hideout, accusing each other of being the person that made it go wrong and trying to figure out who ratted them out and killing each other potentially. It's a game that usually involves a lot of shouting. It's a game that is very high energy, and the deck of cards gives you constant sort of dialogue prompts to keep, it happens all in a single scene. And so the dialogue prompts there to help you keep the action moving and escalate over and over again.
That's cool.
And a lot of those prompts were based on, I do a lot of theater work. I'm a theater director, and I do a lot of improv work and direct improv. And so those prompts were really based a lot on like theater and improv directing prompts, helping actors and improvisers sort of engage and escalate and build stakes using those kind of theater techniques and then putting them into a role-playing game. And the idea is that it's a game that is very rules light, but it can help someone that has no experience with kind of very heavy role-playing, very character-based role-playing. It can sort of support them into stepping into a game where they are fully in the scene and they have those supports to help them keep going. It's cool and weird and fun.
That is awesome.
I played an early version of Lead and Gold with Alex and some other folks at a convention, and I just remember very quickly you kind of shed the idea that we need to figure out who the rat is, because my character confessed to being the rat when I wasn't the rat. And there's basically a sort of mystery rat at the table. And I remember, I didn't know it was them at the time, but that person playing the character who was the rat, looked at me and was like, "What are you?" And I, in character, confessed that I wasn't. I was just trying to cover up for my stepson, who everyone was getting that in the game. Yeah,
it's not really about winning the game. It's about creating that scene, right? Playing out that scene.
Yeah. That really appeals to me.
Yeah, but the best feedback that I ever got was a play tester told me that he played it with his brother, and his brother got an alert on his Apple Watch that his heart rate was too escalated while playing the game.
Wow, it went from like a family dinner to Reservoir Dogs in 2 seconds.
Our role-playing games, they will solve loneliness. They will kill you.
Yeah, the stress will be overwhelming.
You'll have
But boy, what a scene. That's great.
You guys have made other games together, right? Short games.
Yeah, we wrote a game called Fort Creek Almanac together that it won a Golden Cobra Award.
Nice.
Like a damn.
It's about being like ghosts in a small town cemetery. We have a whole little game scene of just weird games that we put in. It's basically excuses to say how can we make our friends be weird and intimate together emotionally. Yeah, and we put that stuff together, and we're working on another weird, intimate, emotional game right now. So
yeah,
nice.
It's exciting, very exciting.
So how do you guys collaborate when you guys came together to write these adventures? You're both writing them. But is one of you taking point on one of them. There's 2 adventures that you guys have made.
Yeah. So for the Land of Eem ones, I think our process kind of changes from project to project. The thing we're writing together right now is much more sort of evenly collaborative, and we sort of have meetings where we divvy up work and plan together. With the Land of Eem adventures, we each sort of took point on one of them and then would swap drafts and look over each other's work.
Yeah.
And Matt's great at that. Matt is very, very good at giving really good notes and at seeing possibilities and potentials. And so I write things on my own. I like writing on my own, but I love writing with Matt. I think because his process, his sort of approach is different from mine. He wants and cares about things that I don't want and care about, but that are to the benefit. That sounds bad, but like that are to the benefit of the work.
I
things that
totally
I don't
get it.
notice. You know, Matt cares about, and then he's like, dude, look right there. And then it's better. And so it was a joy to work on these with Matt. It was a good collaboration.
At one point, the way we did it was, I think we had a conversation where we just sort of spoke out loud our ideas. And then we went and we wrote some stuff. And then, as Alex said, started to trade them back and forth. But I just know that at one point I was in my own creative process, I can get really sensitive about it all. And at one point I said to Alex, all right, I want some feedback on this draft, but like good parts only, compliments. I just needed him to tell me what was working and like what was good and what I could do to make more good stuff. And he's great about that. I mean, he's a teacher. He's a theater person. He can tune in with his audience, which in that case was a very needy writer who just needed to be told he was not a terrible writer. Sometimes we just need to be told what's working well. And so we, after that initial kind of conversation and going off to our own separate little writerly corners to write stuff, we started swapping things back and forth. And then by the end of it, I don't know what I touched and what he touched. It's we're just getting in there and trying to things
Ben
out.
and I can relate to that.
Yeah, take things out that are maybe I'm too precious about them to cut, but Alex can just be like, we say this twice, we can lose one of them. And so we go back and forth that way until we give the adventures to you guys, and then who knows what happens to them. I have no memory of what was. I only look, and then other people just add the parts that are no.
We were in a trance when it happened. I have no memory of the process at all.
Before we get like too deep, let's pitch what the adventures are about. Like, what are some like summaries that you guys could give us?
Alex, do you want to pitch mine and I'll pitch yours?
Yeah, the one that Matt sort of started, and then we started trading back and forth. It is the Underlands Undertours adventure, and it is about the PCs take a job as sort of adventure tour guides. You are hired to be the underlings to a professional adventure tour guide who is taking folks on a journey into the Underlands, and you get sort of away from civilization with these tourists that are all characters and they have their own idiosyncratic sort of selves and their whole things that they want and that they feel and that they believe in. But one thing that they share is that none of them are professional adventurers. None of them are PCs. None of them have much in the way of like a survival skill set. And they're on this guided tour to sort of experience adventure in a safe way. And the first thing that happens is that famous adventure tour guide just is horribly killed in an accident. And so you are left, the bumbling first level PCs or second or third level, right? Low level PCs are left to get these tourists through their adventure, hopefully with them having fun and giving you a 5-star review, because you need to get paid at the end of the adventure. The real dream is that they think it's all part of the fun and they don't even know anything is wrong. And so it becomes this great sort of point crawl adventure where there's a map and the map is filled with locations and sort of possible threads, and the PCs get to choose where they go next and how they get through as they try to find an exit from the Underlands, from this terrible place that they have ended up in. And it's Land of Eem, so it's not just, horrible traps, but all of the creatures, you can fight things, but you can also talk to them. You can get advice. You can make deals. You can sort of work your way through this space. And those tourists are going to get you in trouble over and over again, right? If there's something that would be dangerous to poke, they are going to poke it. If you stop paying attention to them for 5 minutes, they're going to fall down a chasm. Like you have to sort of constantly be corralling
herding
them.
A bunch of Mr. Magoo's is like what is in my brain.
Yes.
It's like peering over the edge of a chasm. Oh, this is pretty. And they're teetering or the cliff is cracking, that kind of thing.
But, one of them is an elderly woman that is cranky, but but competent, but very strong-willed and will not take advice from anyone. And another one is a plucky small child who wants to have an adventure at all costs, right? So
Yeah.
like they all have their own personalities, and you have to pay attention to who they are in order to get them moving together. And it's great. And it was a joy to work on because of that point crawl nature and because of all of those characters. There was just so much that we could do. We found ourselves, our big problem with it was we kept over and over again sending each other messages about word count, word count. We got to cut this. Like we have all these things. We have to cut it down.
Yeah.
We have to keep it manageable because we just wanted to go forever.
Here at Land of Eem, we're on a tight budget. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. George Higgins said exactly the same thing.
Well said. It sounds like an amazing adventure, and I can't wait to play it. What I'll add about it is that, as you know, we've been playing RPGs for the one weird little guy that the GM introduces on a whim that the players just like glom on and say, "This is our guy. We're going to follow this to the ends of the earth." And I wanted to just put like 10 of those guys with purpose into a group together and like make that the adventure.
So
A
great.
funnel system for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get those, any tourists survive, they'll be the weird little guy in a million campaigns. That leads me into Alex's adventure. It was, again, we've played a lot of RPGs, and a lot of the times you get a quest, and then our group just sort of systematically starts undoing that quest, just pulling at little threads, trying to figure out how can I do this in a way that is fun but not as intended. And in Alex's adventure, it's then immediate. As soon as the PCs get on the ground, as soon as they start moving around the tower, or heaven forbid, this wizard has apprentices and henchmen who have their own agendas, who are not necessarily bad people, who are, maybe just working a job, or who are maybe also there to undermine this evil wizard. And the evil wizard, it may or may not be what they seem to be, And so PCs have a lot of different options in clearing out this tower, quote unquote. They can go at the evil wizard if they want to just play that sort of straightforward style. They can team up with some of the henchmen and the apprentices to undermine that wizard. They can decide this contract is not for us. We're working for a corporation that wants to, move into a neighborhood that is not theirs and take what was once a prosperous and interesting piece of architecture. No, we're not going to work for them. And so what Alex does in this adventure is takes a very sort of straightforward setup, go get the wizard out of the tower, and turns it into a living and breathing world full of people who want stuff. And you can talk to those NPCs or fight those NPCs or dig through the weird little rooms and find some weird magic stuff. Come at it in a million different ways to decide how you want to live in this world.
Yeah.
That's great. I love it when
Love that.
I love it when there's like a menagerie of characters with different objectives that can just take things in places that the GM may never expect, but then they've got the tools there to handle it.
Yeah, that was sort of one of our challenges, in addition to word count, is how do we present all of these NPCs so that the GM can read it quickly and know, like, this is who they are and this is what they want. And so we tried to introduce in both of these adventures all of these characters in ways that if the GM reads it once, they can then go back in and reacquaint themselves quickly, or like look at a table where that NPC just has like three things, like what they want from the situation right now and the sort of trouble that they're going to make.
What I love about both of these adventures is that they give the GM so many tools to work with, and it can go in so many different directions that it gives it, for like a seasoned GM that likes to run a lot of games, it gives it like the maximum level of replayability that you could ever have for like an introductory adventure or something like that.
I think these adventures will get into the mix for adventures that get recommended for, first trying out Land of Eem. Because right now it's like Chicken Foot Witch in the Quick Start Guide and JP Kuvert's Hippogriff Heist. Those are the ones that everyone says you should play, but I think these ones can be added.
Yeah.
I think for Matt and I, that's a real value in what we care about in gaming, both for the GM, but also for the players. Like, as a player, I want to know that I can make any choice, but that's also, if I can make any choice at any time, that also can get into a weird feeling of like, well, then does any of this matter? And, if I can just do whatever I want, where is the story? And so finding that balance, support, and of sort of handing the player possibilities and then supporting them in whatever they do with it and letting them play it out the way that they want to play it out. I think both adventures have the possibility to end in 50 different ways, sort of built not just at the GM's discretion, but kind of built into the module. But they also, both of them, you could just take the money or abandon the tourists and like run. And there's consequences. You know, we were like, what if they get into this situation and the PCs are like, well, we leave. And that's a possibility, you know.
The battle-hardened old lady comes and finds them.
Yeah, it's sort of, there's
I love it when
kind of
players
hooks
do
there.
that. They think they can get away with something like that. Then you just bring the whole world against them in the future sessions.
I think we can write that way because Alex and I and Ben and all of our friends who have played these games have kind of run through a lot of modules and been like, well, you're not going to believe what I have planned. And sometimes the module doesn't believe what you have planned. And I mean, modules can't, anticipate what everyone wants to do, but we just want there to be characters on the page and situations that will account for players doing what people would do, which is all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
And which is also fail and be silly and, make mistakes. There's nothing that I like less in a game than the feeling that if I fail, then we're stuck.
Yeah.
Like if I fail, then I have to do it again until I succeed. That feeling of, and I've played modules like that where like you fail at something and then you all look at each other and you're like, well, can I roll it again? Because there's no other way forward. Otherwise it's game over and you just leave. And I never want to give a player that feeling. If the players fail at something, I want that to be just as interesting. I want it to cause the players some stress or something like that. Good stress. But I want it to be just as fun and just as interesting because that's part of the game, right? Like you're supposed to have to fail sometimes. And
that's like
games.
One of our big things with Land of Eem. We wanted that to be into the dice where, if you fail, it's going to move the story in some direction. You can't just like do it again because things have changed.
We just talked about this for, a half an hour on a recent podcast that we recorded because it's such an important element of the game. I mean, you're absolutely right. They need to fail forward.
Yeah. Well, and I think, so many of us grow up on, I grew up on like role-playing games on video games and computers. I loved sort of early like Nintendo, Super Nintendo role-playing games.
Yeah.
And in those, when you fail, you just die or you reset or you grind. You just restart, right? And you do it again. You do the same thing again, but you do it slightly better. Or slightly luckier, and RPGs don't work that way, right? But so many of us are trained to sort of play that way and expect that way.
Right.
And it's a rare video game that sort of doesn't do that. I think my favorite recently would be Disco Elysium, where you're failing fully half the time and not resetting because the failure is hilarious and correct in the game. That's the kind of approach that I want to take to designing things.
Yeah.
That's cool. Which makes me, I want to ask, what were your primary inspirations for your adventures? Like what sparked you to go down these narrative paths?
Matt said the NPC thing. Like, I don't know if there was something else, but I really like that. The more I think a funnel system to weed out the best NPC for the party to just
like who are you going to keep? Who's going to stay with you?
Yeah.
For me, it was that thought of play at the table and giving the GM interesting weird people to interact with. And I also, your game gets called with Lord of the Rings plus the Muppets, and so I kept thinking about what weird little Muppet can like pop out from behind a rock here and like want something from.
Yeah.
And
it's a good instinct.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was just inhabiting that feeling and that sort of mood as I was writing. I was also really interested. One of the things that in the Wizard's Tower, the Tower of Razzamunch, you've been hired by a mining company to kick out this wizard, right? And it's sort of a classic like last tenant on the block. You're being hired by like a skeezy developer, and there's a union in the mine that you can sort of side with if you choose to. And those ideas of the sort of industrial aspects and the sort of local politics of those people, of the working people in this ridiculous fantasy world, and like how do those what happens when there's like sort of real world economic and neighborhood problems happening in a fantasy world was really fun and compelling to me. And I was like, well, these are ridiculous fun characters, and these have this sort of flavorful kind of fantasy elements to them, but I want them to be real characters. And so I want to turn to those sort of real world touchstones for their problems and their wants and things like that.
Yeah.
Can I throw something out about the Tower of Razzamunch? Tell me on track or not on track. Alien 3.
Yeah, I love Alien 3. I think I know it's controversial, but I think it's a great movie.
Just again, if I think about Muppets and that sort of game of, you keep one human and everyone else gets replaced by a Muppet, I imagine Tower of Razzamunch being a kind of, your PCs get thrust into this world. It's underground. There's a contract involved. And again, it could just be as simple as go get the wizard and get him out. But instead you meet the sort of cast of characters that are there. And that becomes the story. Like, what does that cast want, and how do your PCs interact?
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking of Sigourney Weaver. She's just had one grand adventure. She wakes up. She's like, well, this is a different adventure than I was expecting here in this prison planet. Everybody wants something. And you talk to NPCs or you talk to other characters and you figure out what they want. And then you decide how you want to interact with that. I assume you have a Charles S. Dutton character in there somewhere.
Always. Tonally, it's different than Alien 3.
A little, yeah.
Just a little.
So you guys
you can play it however you want,
When we read these adventures, they were pretty fully formed. Like, our feedback was really just like fitting certain things into like Land of, canon or stuff that's already been established that we wanted to like slight changes. But along the way, did you guys, while writing this, like just completely change direction, or did you just like have this idea and executed it as exactly as you thought it was going to go?
I think we were lucky in the way that we approached writing them, because rather than each come up with a pitch, we each came up with like a whole slew of pitches that we then pitched. Matt and I pitched to each other, right? What about this? What about this? Here's, sort of said, we kind of organized them as like, which ones are really compelling to us. And then we came to you guys with the ones that we had already whittled away at. So we had a short list then of ideas that we could then flesh out a little more. And then we were able to pitch those to you guys and then pick two that you guys were excited about, we were excited about. And so by the time that we started even the first draft, we'd already thrown away, 6 bad ideas.
I recall liking all of them. I don't remember the other ones offhand, but
in fact, I'll go so far as to say that like when we first got the pitches, I was like, these are really tight. And then when we got the adventures, I was like, Ben, these are done. Like, they're done already. Like there was like such minor stuff, but I was really just like, wow, that's right out of the box. This is amazing.
Well, I think if we'd been, at least me, Matt's a more polished and professional writer than I am. If I had been writing them, Matt's agreeing. If I had been writing them on my own,
right.
I think you would have seen much rougher stuff at the pitch and at the draft. But because I had Matt there, who I want to talk to every day already, that meant that I had someone to already be doing that a lot of work with, and somebody to be sort of making really great suggestions from the jump. And I think it let us find good ideas fast because we were finding them together.
I think for me, it's a lot like playing in our game, with our role-playing group, because again, I GM a lot, and there's a lot of ideas you throw out and players just are like, I don't care about that. I'm going to go do this thing instead. And one of the things that makes happen is I'm not so precious about some of that stuff. If there's an adventure hook that nobody bites on, I'll just put it over here and either use it again later or I'll forget about it. But it also means when we're collaborating together, we can kind of think through like I'm not creating a story. I'm not writing a novel here. I'm thinking of giving opportunities to interesting players to create something at the table. Like Peter, who we're collaborating with and who does some of the art, I believe, for Land of Eem, he almost always enters a dungeon or a room or a monster's lair and tries to figure out, how do we unionize this organization? How do we, instead of fighting this monster, how do I make this monster into my henchman who is going to follow me around? And
what's hilarious, Peter is playing in our actual play now. He's playing kind of the opposite. He's a unicorn who wants to fight everything.
Yeah, it's actually George who's constantly trying to like hire, fire, or wrangle a critter to be a part of the party.
We're all evolving. That's great. That just underscores to me that one of the things that I think we did when we wrote these is like, we know cool players who try to do weird things. How do we feed opportunities to those players?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And like it's hard, right? How do I give people something that I don't know what they're going to do with? But that's kind of, I think, what we tried to do.
Right.
And so when we're talking through the writing and when we're giving each other notes, Alex and myself, it's that same sort of process. Like this thread doesn't go anywhere, or this thread only gives someone 1 or 2 options. How do we make it so that there's 8 or 12 options in terms of like how someone can react to this? And so it's kind of like, I get to play with Alex once a week. And like he said, I would love to play weird role-playing games with Alex every day. And this is a way of doing that, bouncing ideas off of each other and just trying to make those ideas cooler and weirder. And so that's what our process was like, I think.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
There were lots of moments too where I would get stuck and I would have my own pre-session where I'd be like, okay, I'm stuck. What are the potential solutions to this? And I'd end up with a list of like 4 potential solutions. And then I'd call Matt and be like, which one of these is good? And then I just breathlessly list out all of the possibilities. And like, that's incredibly helpful as a writer to see what somebody else is excited about.
We kind of did that last week, and in the game that we're writing right now, Alex and Peter and I were at different roadblocks, I think, on the project. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but I feel like you came into the call kind of, I don't know if there is a branching path here. This seems like kind of too straightforward. And just through essentially sort of playing a pregame version of it by talking it out, we came up with lots of weird options. And by the end of the conversation, it was not only a game, and not only did we have more options than we thought, it was more interesting than it had been the week before because just talking through that stuff.
I think I entered that moment frustrated, not with like, I don't know, others, but with my own sort of like, I wasn't sure what to do as a writer. And I exited that meeting 2 hours later, very excited, and that's really a joy. It's one of the reasons I like writing with collaborators and with Matt in particular is I feel like every conversation works that way where I get something great out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to knock heads and workshop stuff will often take like a nothing idea and polish it into a gem.
And I mean, just from hearing Ben talk, James, I don't know you as well as I know Ben, but hearing Ben talk about
like
his
his butler.
collaboration with you, I know that there's that there too, that like you guys are doing that sort of work, exciting each other about these cool possibilities. And it's great.
Yeah. We get together, we brainstorm a lot together. And just because of scheduling in our, adult lives now, where the actual writing together, which we used to do a lot more, we got to do separately, but we're on the same wavelength creatively. Yeah. So you just kind of feel like extensions of each other.
I picture it like Ghost, where you're both holding the same pencil together.
That's how I do it. That's the headspace I put myself into. And wraps his arms around me. I use a feather pen and an inkwell just for atmosphere reasons.
That too. That's how you got
it. It's a lot like Robert E. Howard, just imagining Conan and like behind him with a sword, just like ready to kill him.
Tell my tales.
For some reason,
that's how Land of Eem is written, ladies and gentlemen.
Tell you, for some reason, that does make me think of, I remember playing Dungeons and Dragons with Ben and a bunch of our grad school friends who had never played Dungeons and Dragons before for one day. And for whatever reason, we all decided to take a break from playing D&D. And we went downstairs where our friend had a basketball court, attached to his apartment building. And we just, like, Ben is an athlete and can play basketball. And so we all decided to play like 5-on-1 versus Ben, like as if he was, I don't know, the basketball GM. And
they call him hoops.
he beat all of our little writerly, nerdly selves home. And for whatever reason, Ben, when you said Conan standing behind Robert E. Howard with a sword, I thought that's Ben playing basketball versus Faye.
Playing basketball with a bunch of nerds, yeah.
Amongst you, I'm a god. I'm also terrible. I used to get frustrated as a kid because I wanted to play basketball more than many other sports, but I was so bad at it that I got discouraged.
We all have our struggles.
My daughter is currently learning how to play baseball, and then she kind of accidentally got her hand on a tennis racket. And she realized that it's easier to hit the baseball with the tennis racket. And so now that's what to do. She just wants me to pitch a little wiffle ball to her so she can whack it with a tennis racket. So James, maybe consider playing basketball with a tennis racket and see if
yeah. I tried it with a hockey stick. Disaster.
I think that makes it, does that make it polo, lacrosse, something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, which is the one with a horse.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up and none of my friends ever wanted to play any sports. So I was always friends with people who wanted to play RPGs.
Thank you.
And so it was like this other life that I had to live. Then when I was like around with the basketball guy, I was like, I don't like these people.
Shots fired.
Not playing RPGs. I did play a lot of, I think technically sports, especially as a teenager, but mostly it was driveway roller hockey because
hours of driveway roller hockey. I also played baseball and soccer. in middle school, which I did enjoy.
Alex and I have had like writerly meetings where you are literally disassembling a rollerblade while we're talking.
Yeah, I just refurbished I still have my old Rossi's Streets. They're super vintage at this point. They don't make them like that. Hard boot, like really nice. They're like they're good vert skates for like half pipes and stuff like that. That's stuff that I used to love. I still love, but now I'm 44, and if I fall in a half pipe, I will permanently damage myself. So
I feel like this is good content. This is going to help your Kickstarter, right? This is
Yeah, exactly.
we're old and we might break.
Here's how I hurt myself today. Here's what I use.
Let's make that game. When you set up your stats, they're all -1, no matter what.
And if you fail at anything, you just shatter.
Wait, now I kind of want to write a game about a bunch of mid-40s dads who get together for like one last sweet skate session.
You roll from misfortune when you wake up in the morning just to see like what hurt.
I mean, if anything could be called skate or die, it's that.
Yeah,
Wow,
perfect.
you're right.
Die.
Ladies and gentlemen, creativity is happening right now.
Doing it, yeah.
This is how it works. So I did have one more question for you guys.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, so what do you hope the GMs and players take away from running your adventures or playing in them?
I think my dream scenario is someone who is used to one mode of play and finds an adventure ending or going somewhere that they didn't know. Like I want that experience, like the experience I had playing Fiasco for the first time, being like, I didn't know tabletop RPGs could be like this. Weird people talking about their failures and it being fun. I want someone to like play our Eem adventure and be like, I didn't know you could unionize the Wizard's Tower. And that's the game. That's my dream scenario, I think.
Matt loves tables. He loves, rather than telling the GM what is going to happen, he loves giving them like a table to roll on. And so there's a bunch of really fun tables. And I think that one of the things Matt is really good at is putting those possibilities for discovering something new into that sort of random roll. I think sometimes tables can feel like a chore because you're like, well, all of these things are essentially the same or they don't matter and they're random. And I think Matt is very good at filling those things with story and possibility and I think that supports what Matt's talking about in the games. I think what I want is for players to have that feeling of the ability to just absolutely say yes to each other and the GM and the game in the moment, and to feel in it and to be able to just sort of fluidly move forward and not be thinking, is this the best choice? Is this the right choice? That moment where somebody else does something unexpected and everybody at the table goes, that's the thing. Like I never would have thought of that. And that's the thing we should do right now. That's such a good feeling. And I want these games to make people feel that feeling.
That's great. Yeah. Investing in the emerging story unfolding in potentially a randomish way.
Yeah. And not knowing what the right answer is until it's literally already happening is it feels so good.
A counter move. The right answer to this was to reference that Apple Watch going off. And so I want someone to have a heart attack.
This is so intense. It elevates your heart rate to a dangerous
Real
level.
world lethality.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for joining us. And,
thank you.
We love your adventures, and we were super happy to have you guys write for Land of Eem.
It was so fun.
Yeah, I'll do it anytime.
Fantastic.
Like we said before, we've got a Kickstarter going on right now. So please check it out, share it with your friends. It's the next expansion for Land of Eem with the Underlands Sandbox, 4 new regions, the same detail that went into the Mucklands, and there's 40 new adversaries, lots of cool stuff.
Tons of dungeons. And if you support today, you can help to unlock more adventures from these gentlemen.
Awesome. All right.
I'm ready.
We'll see you next time.
Indeed. Farewell.
Bye-bye now.